Okay, so is the clerk ready to take notes?
The clerk is ready. The question is, do we have a quorum?
Oh. Okay,
Oh,
good.
good.
Thank you.
That-
Do you know
I
anything
think
about
that's the
Senator
quorum.
Gray? Okay. Yeah, could you? Yeah. Thank-
Yeah, there was another meeting across the hall, but that ended. I was at, there were two meetings across the hall. I was at the first one.
Were there senators there?
Well, there's also Janetti.
Senator Innes was there and Senator Gray was there.
Oh,
Oh, okay.
I'm not
So,
sure if
so
they-
he's nearby.
Yeah.
Well,
went off to make a call or
but
something.
that
first.
meeting ended about 20 minutes ago.
Oh, okay.
Haven't
all
had so
right.
many other
Those
meetings
meetings
as
were
well.
thankfully short. Well, you've got pretty thorough minutes here.
Well, we have
I
three.
do that.
Don't we have like 3 members out of 5? So that's okay.
Is the number
Yeah,
assigned 7
I
or
guess
6 or 5?
3? Really?
Membership is 5, and then we have alternate also.
Right.
Yeah, I think we're good with 3. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. All right. Let's get started. So, oh, here we go. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Welcome, Senator Rosenwald. So, let's take a look at the agenda. I don't see any changes needed. Anybody else?
There is one thing that if we're reviewing findings and recommendations,
Mm-hmm.
after the follow-up from natural and cultural resources and treasurer, it'd be nice to have the treasurer and natural and cultural resources still here. That's one of the,
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear.
oh, sorry. It'd be nice to have the treasurer and natural and cultural resources still here when we're reviewing findings, since they've got an awful lot of what we need to do today.
All right. I was kind of hoping that the treasurer's time, we could let her go after her part. So, but it's up to her whether she has time or not. Okay, fine. All right. Yeah, if you want to work on your phone or something, that's it's fine with me. All right. So, any other changes to the agenda? No.
Nope.
Everyone in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Any opposed? Okay. So we have an agenda. All right. Welcome, Treasurer Mazzapelli. Madam Treasurer, I guess. I had a couple of questions. The reason I asked her to come is a couple of things came up from our last meeting that I sent her questions and she sent responses, but I thought that maybe other members, might like to ask questions also. So we'll just get into what I asked and what she responded. So, if you remember, the DRA had a fund that was paying off their new information system, right? So it was the Revenue Information System Fund, which was fund number 337, accounting unit 5773, and it seemed like a weird fund because it was just accumulating money to get to $40 million. But at the same time, we've borrowed money, right? So we're paying interest on this borrowed money and we're accumulating money. And so I asked the question of, can't we, pay off these bonds early since we have this extra money accumulating? And her response was, we can't, because when we bond things, we don't just send out a bond for this particular information system. We send out a bond for everything that the state is borrowing. And secondly, that when we make bonds, they're not callable for 10 years. So we're committed to paying off those bonds over 10 years plus. And then thirdly, the money, when we have spare money, we're earning more interest on it than we're paying interest on these bonds, so we wouldn't want to do it anyways. Is all that correct?
That is correct. Good morning. For the record, State Treasurer Monica Mazzapelli. That is correct. So I was trying to explain that when we look at just one project or one fund, it's not that simple to separate the debt for just that project because we issue bonds, and when we issue bonds, we gather all of the eligible projects. All of the agencies have spent money on particular projects. So then we say, okay, it's time to bond, and so we grab those, and those are the ones that we fund. We with the bond proceeds, we pay for those projects. So it's not that simple to separate. Once in a while, we do have specifics, and we're able to issue something in particular. But for the most part, our general process is to just essentially just grab all those projects and fund them with the bond proceeds. We do, on a regular basis, we do review what's callable. So, and when that happens, we have essentially the opportunity to try to see if it makes sense to refund those bonds, to issue refunding bonds. So we'll have that opportunity. So we issue in general once a year, we issue bonds. So in general, we'll do it in March again. And during that time, we'll see bonds that have reached that date to see if it's feasible, if it makes sense to issue refunding bonds. So that's sort of the process. So looking at just RIMS and specifically, that RIMS fund was in House Bill 25 when that was enacted. It was the plan, the way the law was written, is that the general fund was going to pay for $6 million, and then the rest of the funding, of the rest of like $24 million, was going to come from this additional revenue that was going to be generated from the system. It was going to be placed in this specific fund, and then the debt service was going to be paid from those monies. So that's why I believe it's okay that if they just accumulate, unfortunately, we can't just take the money and pay off the bonds. We just have to make sure there is enough money when it's time to pay that service. That money comes from the fund and not the general fund. So we we make sure that the bonds are being paid, the portion related to RIMS comes from those other monies.
Senator Rosenwald.
Thank you. Thank you for that, for trying to make it at my level. But have we been able to generate higher interest on those bonds than we need to pay off the RIMS fund, the RIMS expense? Is there any, I know we're limited to, I think it's 4 million a year or something. Are we making more money than we need to keep in that fund?
So I don't fully understand the methodology or what gets recorded in that fund. I believe there's a methodology, DRA puts it together. So in terms of paying the bonds, I think the intent of the law was to make sure there was enough money in there to pay the debt service. Whether there is more right now that should be is really difficult for me to answer. What I know is that fund by itself doesn't earn interest. As you know, we pool all of the cash. The funds that earn interest are that's written in law. So if there's a dedicated fund entitled to earn interest, it's specifically written in the law, and those are the ones that when we look at all the interest that we earn, then we need to see all of the funds that have an interest, that are entitled to receive interest, and then we allocate interest. So for example, the RIMS fund does not get interest. So the general fund keeps that portion. So that was also part of your question. Why can, for example, even the TRAMP money, why isn't that receiving interest? It's because it wasn't written in the law that that interest is credited to that appropriation. I believe that was just an appropriation from the last biennium. And so it's just sitting there. So if it's sitting there, we're investing the money and the state is earning money. In terms of the interest rates, we've been in an environment we've been able to earn higher interest because of, the higher interest rates in the short term. The long term have been pretty consistent at about 4%. So those are normally those are higher interest rates, but because of the different interest rate environment that we've been experiencing, we've been benefiting from having all this cash and then we've been earning interest. That's going to change. It's going to go back to long-term interest rates are going to be higher than short-term. So, but right now, while we go through the process that's going to occur over the next 2 years, right now we're earning more interest with those funds that are sitting there. You're welcome.
So right now we're paying like 4% and earning 5 or something like that? Is
Yes.
that right? Okay. But it's going into the general fund.
It is
Yeah.
going to the general fund. If the law doesn't say that those funds get interest, then the general fund is getting all of that.
Right.
That's what you see in the revenue focus.
All right. So how about the management of the DRA fund? Should that be in your office instead of theirs? Because it didn't seem like they knew much about it except that they are putting money into it, sort of.
Right. I think it's more of an accounting transaction. I mean, they just handle the accounting. Again, we pull all the cash. We invest all of the funds. So regardless of where the funds are being recorded, what agency has it, we handle all the cash ourselves. So in essence, we are managing that fund. And then when it's time to allocate interest, then we look at all those individual funds of all of the agencies, and then we allocate interest.
All right. Yes, Representative Mullin.
Yes, I'm sorry DRA isn't here, I think. But what happens at the end of the period when we've got 40 million in that account? If that is more than is needed to finish paying off the bonds, does it go directly to general funds?
I believe so. I think the law considered that piece. I can find the reference in the statute. I think it was either it's in the REMS law that says if there's excess fund, it can go back to the general fund.
So if they at that point needed to do some kind of update, which they think is going to be rare because we don't have sales and income taxes, then they'd have to start over again getting it out of the budget.
Right. So right here is RSA 21J, column 1B, paragraph 3. It does talk about sending the excess money to the general fund.
Thanks.
Right. And then the other question I asked her was about fund number 104, accounting unit 3705, the Cannon Mountain Capital Improvement Fund. And this one, as you recall, it's used to make improvements to the ski area. And we've borrowed, as I remembered, something like $6 million over the years, and so they're paying, those are borrowed monies, and they're paying off the debt. But at the same time, we also allocated something like 18 million to help Cannon Mountain replace their tram, and they're still trying to find a vendor and doing other stuff. So my question was, since the 18 million is sitting there earning interest, and since we borrowed 6 million for essentially similar purposes, should we just pay that off? But the answer was we can't, and we shouldn't because of the interest difference. But the other question, and she touched on it, was maybe the interest on the $18 million that's sitting around ought to go to this fund, whereas right now it's going to the general fund.
It is, and I went to it was House Bill 2 where these funds were appropriated. It was just 18 million was appropriated, and the only language added in that section was that the funds are non-lapsing. So there's it's silent on interest. So when again, for us, it's black and white. If we don't see it, we don't allocate interest to something that is silent. And it gets really difficult. Right now we have interest to allocate, but it was very difficult when there was absolutely not, we weren't earning any interest those years. So
Okay, so I would just suggest that maybe we, to that non-lapsing, we say an interest is credited to the fund or something like that. However,
because
whatever the
I don't believe this is a dedicated
Senator
fund. This
Rosenbaum.
is just an appropriation that says it's not lapsing, but it's not a typical.
Oh, it's not a dedicated
It's not a
fund?
typical dedicated fund that is listed in RSA 12. This is just an appropriation that is not lapsing money.
I got you.
That's my understanding.
All right, Senator Rosenwald.
Well, I recall from last week, we had a lot of discussion about the difference between Cannon Mountain as part of the ski area and Franconia Notch State Park. And they seem to be different. The tram, I think, mostly brings visitors in the summer rather than during the ski season. It operates in the winter, but it's really more of a summer and fall draw. So it does subsidize the entire state park system because it brings in so much money.
Well, I'm not sure about that because, I mean, isn't there for skiers lift tickets and they have to go up the tram? I mean, how else do they?
No,
No.
they don't have to go up the tram, excuse me.
Okay.
They,
We could bring the
We
All right.
have the experts
All right.
here.
So, all right. So, you do want to join us? Yeah. Okay.
Good morning, Brian Wilson, Director of Division of Parks and Recreation. To clarify, the overall park fund is separated into various accounts within the fund. The ski area account, which is the operation of Cannon Mountain ski areas, you think of winter operations, but in the tram is part of the legislatively part of the ski area account. So the tram subsidizes the ski area overall operation. They are very, very intertwined, although the primary ridership is taking place in the in non-winter season. Just like any other ski area, that four-season revenue is essential, whether it's lodging opportunities or other opportunities within the venue to create revenue outside of the short winter season is really essential for us to sustain that account.
So my question is, how do skiers get to the top of the mountain?
So there's a number of lifts, 10 or
Okay, so there are chair lifts
yes,
and rope lifts
in the
and
wintertime, the tram does not operate every day. It's partially it's weather conditions, but generally on peak visitation, vacation weeks, weekends is when it's operating. So it's not essential to the skier experience, but it is an element that we do utilize during the wintertime.
I didn't understand that. So, right, exactly. I was thinking that's how you get there to ski, right? But apparently not. So, so it's really more like Sunapee, right? It's a separate source of revenue that happens, but it's used by the skier, right?
Except,
Okay, okay, Representative Molly.
except it is owned by the state and it is falling apart. So in that, it is not like Sunapee at all. It's in danger of reducing the amount of money available for the ski area.
Sure. Okay. So let me ask you for a number. How much revenue comes from the tram every year?
Gross revenue is about $1.5 million directly attributed to the tram. Now, there's other components to that. We have retail and concession operations, both at the base and the summit of the tram facility that aren't accessible by other means within the ski area. So when you start to include those ancillary revenue streams as well, too, it adds up to a significant amount that all directly goes to help support Cannon Mountain ski area.
Senator Gray,
I
and
would
then
take
Representative
exception
Walden.
to the words "it's falling apart." Okay, it is
It may
costing
fall
more to
apart.
maintain it, and it's reaching the end of its life, which are softer words, but we don't want our visitors to think that they can't go on the tram because it's falling apart.
Good old ketchup and mustard.
Representative Walden.
Yeah, do you have any idea what the significant amount of concession money that's attached to it is?
That's in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, a few hundred thousands of dollars, and again, that's, you know, for season revenue, so that's attributed to, you know, what's going on at the park on any given day. For instance, I was there yesterday at the park with our general manager Jace Worth, who's here in the audience. Just a quick little antidote. I did just a cruise through the parking lot on a Tuesday. There were license plates from 33 different states, 3 different Canadian provinces, and 1 car from Estonia. It's a very bustling place here during the, and all of these things are tied together. Folks are visiting the Flume Gorge. We're encouraging them to go up the road to go visit the tram, and vice versa. So there's a lot of interconnectivity between the tram operation in the summertime, which is supporting the ski area, but also the residual effects both from the parks, you know, down the road at the Flume and our campgrounds and everything that Franconia Notch State Park has to offer.
And presumably, you could use an extra $75,000 a month of interest on this $18 million.
That
For the
would be
tram.
great. We can use every resource that we can for
Okay.
the park system. Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Now let's, as long as you're here, let's talk about. You have 2 different accounting units in this one dedicated fund, right? One for all the parks and one for the ski area. Would it be useful to have 2 separate dedicated funds? I mean, they would still essentially operate the same way, but
Yeah,
for
I know this
reporting.
came up a couple weeks ago when we were here before you, and I know Chris Marino, who's here, is maybe perhaps better to speak to that because he's the one helping, you know, work our books. I mean, I think from our standpoint, the structure, from my position, the structure of the park system is that these, although separate accounting units within the fund, were created, and we have the ability to support each other in times of needs. For instance, there's been years where Canon has done really well and the park system not so much, and we have the ability to move resources back and forth within the fund to help bolster one account or another. So if some things like that we're able to still sustain, I would defer to Chris for some guidance on that.
Yeah, I'm happy to clarify. Chris Marino, Natural and Cultural Resources. And yes, I do recall this coming up, and this is related to number 33, fund number 33, which the number 33 captures 2 components of the entire park system. So on the one hand, you have the Cannon Mountain Ski Area account, which is a component of the broader park fund. And then you have the multiple accounting units that comprise the state park account, which is the other sort of half of the entire park fund. So I understand it seems a little confusing, but there are 2 distinct accounts within that park fund. So to answer your question, yeah, I think it would be probably make sense to go ahead and separate those into 2 separate itemized account numbers under RSA 612. We're happy to do that, and would be, if it would be helpful, we're certainly supportive of that.
What's his name again?
thank you. All right, other Representative Walmy? Yeah.
Sorry, could you remind me of your name again? I'm clerking.
I apologize. My name is Chris Marino.
Marino, yes,
Yes.
thank you.
Senator Gray?
On,
Oh, did you have something?
yeah, I just
sorry.
wanted to say that it sounds in the books as if we're talking just about Canaan Mountain, not about the entire park service, which is what actually 333B is.
I agree. Yes.
Right, so it could have a better title. So, yes, Senator Gray.
Again, the end of your statement confused me a little. Do you want 2 separate dedicated funds or just 2 accounting units under the one dedicated fund?
We maintain 2 dedicated fund accounts, we should have two dedicated fund accounts. In this case, we are technically creating them separately. We have the Cannon Mountain Dedicated Fund, which is the ski account fund, and we have the multi-account state park fund account, which is the other half of the park fund. But they both have they're both assigned the same dedicated fund number. So we'd want to separate those and make those distinct dedicated fund numbers to establish them clearly as separate dedicated funds.
So, in my opinion, that would be appropriate for this, but the tram interest would not be appropriate for the bill that this company is going to do, because it is not a dedicated fund. It's just,
Need to be added to one of the dedicated funds. So if you want to add interest or language related to interest, you want to do it on a fund that has a balance, because again, we just credit interest and we look at the balances at the end of the quarter. So we want to make sure there is a balance in one of those dedicated accounts.
Right. And there is a dedicated fund that's borrowed the $6 million for Canon related maintenance, right? So that would be the appropriate fund, I would think. Yeah.
If I may, so that dedicated account was again similar to the REMS. It was created back in 1998 to, so the capital improvement fund is unique. It is a revolving fund. Is a revolving fund in a way that you have there is this authority to bond on a regular basis up to $6 million. So it's very unique than all of the capital projects that are bonded by the state, because those go through House Bill 25. This particular authority is very unique. So in order to, Cannon Mountain has the ability to, on a regular basis, borrow money, and just if there is capacity, they can keep borrowing and repay those funds. So that dedicated account is to maintain Sunapee revenue, the revenue from Sunapee, and with that, the debt service gets paid. That's how the language is written. So I'm not really sure you want to add interest to that. You could, I'm not sure.
Yeah,
but-
if I may, just to, if I'm understanding what you're suggesting is, essentially you're suggesting diverting the interest that is being earned on the $18 million, we're talking about that, to divert that to support the additional paying of the debt service against this Cannon Mountain Capital Improvement Fund. So it'd be money to support payoff of the debt service in addition to the Sunapee revenue that comes in. Is that capsules what we're talking? Okay. Yeah, we're very
Yes.
supportive of that idea.
Because it's really, we allocated this 18 million for Canon, right? I mean, it's not really for the tram. I mean, but it's not really for the general fund, right? So
It's for it's to support the tram, but as the treasurer has pointed out, the language is silent on doing anything with any interest earned on that. And in
Yes.
that case, because there is nothing specifically prescribing what to do with the interest that is earned from that funds, it stays within the general
and maybe
fund.
by the time we could get a bill done, you will have already spent it on the tram, right? So I don't know. Is that
I suppose anything's possible. I couldn't speak to that.
okay?
In
All right.
6 months.
Well, I don't know. How close is the contract to being signed and all that?
We are probably, I'd say at least another 2 years out. And that's, we're kind of in between a place here where we've already bid the projects, and that cost came in well over the $18 million. So we're still kind of in a gap here of trying to understand through this next budget cycle, hopefully what direction we're going to be going.
Senator Rosenwald.
I think it makes sense to keep Cannon Mountain and Franconia Notch State Park separate from other parks, because they are parks that also charge fees that get approved by fiscal. So they have another revenue source. And most of our state parks, I don't think, charge even for parking. but every year we approve fees for usage of both camping in Franconia Notch and skiing at Cannon. So it seems to me to make sense to separate those funds from the rest of the park system.
All right, thank you. Other comments? Okay. Yes, Representative Almy.
I didn't hear you discussing that option at all. To take 33 and separate it into 3 parts, as I understand it. One which would be the ski area, one which would be Franconia Notch, and one which would be every other park in the state.
Okay, just to clarify, it would only be a division of 2, not 3. Franconia Notch State Park, although residing at the same location as Cannon Mountain, is captured already in the state park account component,
Yeah.
which is the other half. So it would already be included. So therefore, two would be fine to capture everything properly.
Senator Rosenwald's okay with that? I see you're nodding. Okay. All right. Other questions for Treasurer Metzapelli? Seeing none, thank you very much. All right. So I think the next thing on our agenda was the Connecticut Lakes 3 funds. You were going to get us more information about that. And in the book, let's see, those are numbers 219
to 221.
to 221. So therefore, pages 147 is where they start. All right. And in their report,
No, that's not.
number 219. So I'm not sure where in their report. Oh, here we go.
You found
So,
it?
yeah. So in the report that they sent us, it's page 21 of 36.
Good. And Connecticut Lakes out of, no, it's forestry. There we go.
All right, thank you. So, did you hand out anything or not? Not really. don't
If
see
I
any.
may, there hasn't been any additional
Information?
information or any handouts. However, I did invite the treasurer to join us today to answer any specific questions you had about the funds that you're inquiring about.
Oh, okay.
To the extent that we could elaborate a little bit on your understanding of these funds, as that's what I understood was.
Oh, okay. Well, I wanted to know, there's an endowment, right? So,
Correct.
so isn't there,
There are 3.
Three
there are
endowments.
3 endowments, but
Yes.
there should be, this one has $3 million and that one has 12 million, whatever the number.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Is that what you'd like to discuss?
That's what we'd like to
Okay.
know. Yeah.
So I'd
So,
look to invite.
Madam Treasurer?
Well, I've invited the deputy treasurer, chief treasurer,
Okay.
Rachel.
All right.
I
thank you.
worked with her to
Yeah.
clarify an understanding of how we're maintaining these, and she is.
Could I
Here
ask
to help
you
us.
also,
I'm sorry.
where did this endowment come from? And do they have strings still?
So the endowment came from the acquisition. There was land that was acquired, and this is a document that gives a background going back to 2003. This area was managed by the New Hampshire Fish and Game Department, and the state of New Hampshire acquired a comprehensive conservation easement of 146,400 acres. Along with that, established 3 separate endowments to benefit both DNCR and the Fish and Game in the management of this area. So there were three endowments established, each with a principal balance. One was referred to as the monitoring endowment. One was referred to as a stewardship endowment. And the third was a road maintenance endowment. Each having their own principal amounts as prescribed in Chapter Law 2002, Chapter 148 Laws of 2002. So those were established as endowments with principal amounts under the authority prescribed in law at the time. Since that time, those funds are held in these endowments by the Treasury, who invests, manages, and so forth. And over a period of time, we are eligible to draw from these endowments on a periodic basis certain amounts within limits as allowed to use the funds to administer the stewardship authorities that were prescribed for the purpose of these endowments. So that is essentially fundamentally where these endowments come from and what their purpose is, how they were established. Does that answer the question for you,
So
Representative?
it was entirely a state creation.
Essentially.
All right, so let's start with the first one, number 219. So I'm guessing this has a balance of $1 million or something like that. Is that-
So 219 in the book, that would be the Connecticut Headwaters Tract Monitoring Endowment. And the Tract Monitoring Endowment started with a principal balance of $1.25 million. That's accounting at 3747.
Okay.
And of course has grown substantially in that time. So it currently does have an ending balance right now of just over $3 million.
Wow, okay. So is there any reason why that can't be on this report?
So it can be on the report, Representative. I had a conversation with the comptroller actually this morning. So this report has always been designed to depict the state's what they call their ledger balances. So essentially, the report is only showing you, as you I'm sure you've surmised, what we're spending and obviously the draws from the fund to pay for it. So it gives no insight, as you obviously, into these funds themselves. What we can do is we can expand the narrative component of this report to elaborate, to include that additional information so that you have a broader understanding as you read this report, to understand in terms of the activity on the table, what you're seeing is the ins and you're seeing the amount being expended and of course the draw to cover it. But we can elaborate with a separate part of this report to clarify that information so you understand the beginning ending balance of this endowment and any additional information related to it.
Could I?
Just a moment. So why was the revenue only $5,600 if you have $3 million invested?
In this particular endowment, this is the Tract Monitoring Endowment, which is the least active of the three endowments. That's essentially what that indicates is there was just very little activity occurring relative to the monitoring of the tract monitoring that was necessary.
Oh, are you saying the $3 million is the sum of the three?
The $3 million, no, is the value of the endowment for this specific purpose. However, yes, there was only $5,600 actually spent out of the endowment, out of the $3 million endowment in total, due to very little activity related to the need to.
All right. So is $3 million there for monitoring compliance?
Yes, the $3 million that is in that account right now is specifically established for the purpose of tract monitoring, which
Okay.
encompasses,
Right, and
as
stewardship
described.
is yet another,
Yes,
some million,
stewardship is
and-
another
and roads are
activity.
another one.
and road maintenance is
Okay,
the other.
fine.
Yes, that is correct.
All right, thank you. Representative Almy.
Yes, at least the last time I heard, the AG's office was, and a lot of other people were heavily involved in protecting that particular monitoring endowment. That is, that the new owner of a large tract within there had come in with the intention of turning the whole place into a permanent forest with no logging and pretty much nothing else, so that he could get credits from the National Climate Mitigation Project, and that was being opposed by quite a lot of people that live on timbering in that area, and by the fact that the endowment itself, the easement specifies that a certain amount of logging is going to go on in every year, and that a certain amount of sports recreation is going to go on in every year in the whole tract. Who's paying for the AG's office, etc.? Is that not an expense that should be in there?
So I'm going to defer any clarifications to the commissioner. She's obviously heavily involved in the
Chomping at the
details.
bit to talk about this. Sarah Stewart, Commissioner of the Department of Natural and Cultural Resources. So there was an easement established 20 years ago. The state paid $20 million for that. A very substantial investment to ensure public access, hunting, fishing, recreation, etc. On this amazing tract of land. And over the past 20 years, there's been several sales and purchases of the fee owner of that land. And over the years, that land has been harvested for timber successfully. The easement does not include a minimum amount of logging. The conversation at the time around the easement was so focused on, we don't want to see this property clear cut, that they established a ceiling, but not a floor. And so we are still in the process of receiving public comment. We've had several public meetings. My agency and Fish and Game are working closely with our attorneys that are already provided to us for a number of reasons from the AG's office. So this is just part of their portfolio of work. So we're not billing. There's no billing for their investment of time to understand the easement and to work with us and Aurora, which is the fee owner, to make sure their stewardship plan for this property is in line with the easement. And so over the last several months, we've been negotiating, might be too strong a word, in conversations with them. They've submitted a draft plan that's public. The public comment closes on Friday. We have a meeting up in Pittsburgh on Friday, a regularly scheduled meeting. At the close of that meeting, we'll evaluate the public comment and get back to Aurora, and there'll be some more iterations of that plan before the state is in a position to approve it. But there still is logging on the property. There is a lot of rumors out there that there isn't. There still is, and we're committed to that tradition and economic support for the region.
If I
Yes,
could.
follow up, go ahead.
Yeah, so the cost of all of this is found inside of your general administrative costs,
Yeah.
and the AG's office is not financially involved, shall we say.
They're just our advisors, as they are for many of our issues in this agency. We could support a whole law firm.
All right. Well, so my main thing is, I don't think this report is acceptable. You know, this page 147, 149, 150, because it should be reported just like any other fund, right? There should be a balance, which went from 1.25 million to 3 million. There should be revenue, which is the actual revenue on that amount. There should be expenses, which are the actual expenses. You're reporting as though the revenue and the expenses are equal. Well, they're not, right? The fund is growing. So, you know, can you get us new reports?
Absolutely. And
Okay.
I will be, like I said, I spoke with the comptroller this morning. We're going to work to revise the report to give you that additional information to be seen on these reports, so that we go beyond just the basic ledger requirements, which this is a depiction of, and give you a true understanding of what these endowments are, what their value is, even a history of what has been drawn from them and the earnings and so forth. So we will work to revise these.
Right. So if, for example, you decided you needed a major monitoring project, right, to put cameras all over the place or something like that, then there's some money here to do it, and you wouldn't have to come to us to say, Alec, give me some more, you know, borrow money or general fund money or something for this project, right?
Yes, and that's typically how we've managed the support of the Connecticut Headwaters relative to these endowments.
Okay, thank you. Representative Ballmer.
Thank you. But on my impression is that when we get this, that on very small percentage of the money in that particular endowment would be being used. Whereas from the reports, the endowment that is to maintain the roads is feeling quite underfunded. And the other one, I'm not so sure of, the endowment for habitat and public use management, which seems to overlap with roads.
All right, let's go on to any more questions about monitoring. No. Okay, let's go on to the next one, which is stewardship. This is management. What is the next one?
Habitat. and
Stewardship.
Stewardship is one way of putting it, but they also say another one is stewardship.
Yeah. Well, there's monitoring, there's stewardship, and there's roads, right? So let's go to the stewardship.
Correct. So stewardship, again, was also established as a $1 million principal amount for the purpose of habitat and public use management of 25,000 acres of natural areas owned by the state of New Hampshire, and for the purpose of recreation use and the conservation easement management of the 146,400 acres on which the state shall hold a conservation easement. So again, it was another endowment established with a specific purpose in mind, and it has been used for that purpose since that time.
Okay. And the current value?
The current value on that one is which one? 2.613 million. Yes, $2.6 million.
Okay. So this one is healthy, I guess.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Questions on this? No. All right.
I just,
Oh, Representative Wellman?
I find these so overlapping. Stewardship includes monitoring. Stewardship includes all the rest of this stuff. And
Yeah.
to call any part of it stewardship is,
Representative, I'm hearing what you're saying. And perhaps after we talk about the roads, I would like to, at the risk of causing unintended consequences, talk a little bit more broadly about how, you know, if we have resources that are underutilized, but we have a really big need over here and we're not allowed to, it's worth a conversation to see if we can there could have been a very specific reason in 2003 that they were set up separately, but here we are, and we have over 200 miles of roads, and culverts are very expensive, and there's engineering involved, and that fund is never going to be enough. So perhaps we can hear a little specific about the roads fund and then talk about what is possible to balance this out.
All right, thank you. So let's go to roads then, which is number 221.
Right. So, as the commissioner aptly pointed out, it is another separate endowment with a specific purpose in mind. This was again established at $1.25 million in funds from TPL and the Society of Protection of New Hampshire Forests for the purpose of ensuring a perpetual source of funds to maintain the system of roads that exists within the easement and property interests acquired by the state in the Connecticut Headwaters Tract. So again, very specific, each one is clarified with a specific intent, but we are seeing the need to possibly consolidate or have the latitude to overlap. For example, the monitoring endowment, which was to ensure a perpetual source for monitoring compliance with the terms and conditions of the easement, is over $3 million. It would be good for us to be able to divert some of that available resource to the other components of the stewardship of this area, specifically the road maintenance. So it would be helpful to be able to do that.
What's the balance on the road?
The
fund?
balance in this one is $2.4 million.
Okay. All right.
Could I just?
Yes, Representative Wellman.
You just spoke of TPL, and which I don't know what that stands for, and the Society for
I'm sorry,
Protection-
Trust for Public Lands.
Trust for Public
Yes.
Lands. That's a national one, isn't it?
The Trust for Public Lands, I believe is that specifically
A national.
a national
National
nonprofit?
nonprofit.
Okay.
Yeah, and the Society for Protection of Forests is unique to New Hampshire,
Correct.
and
this
is
case.
what brought us back our trees from total disaster, and do they hold the supervision of the state's easement, or why did you mention them?
I was just clarifying for you the source of the funds that established these endowments. In the case of,
They provided the funds.
correct. In the case of the monitoring endowment, Trust for Public Lands provided the 1.25 million. In the case of the stewardship endowment, it was a combination of the Nature Conservancy and the Trust for Public Lands, and then for the road maintenance endowment was a combination of funding from the Trust for Public Lands and the Society for the Protection of New Hampshire Forests.
Wow. So they have some kind of legal ability to oversee what we're doing with these, don't they?
I'm not entirely sure how.
I don't think so. I
Yeah.
think they just believed in the cause and chipped in so that there would be these funds
You have-
established. I don't need to I don't need to run the easement by them, in terms of like the annual operating plan or the management plan. They're not. I think it was just part of their mission to help establish the funds.
Because we're under a third now of our land in Lebanon, which is conserved, is under them. We left because and are working with another group because they're easier to work with, but and they were extremely we had to spend a huge amount of money at one point when someone broke an easement on one of those.
Yeah.
And we could not force him without about 4 years of lawyers to get out of our property.
No, they don't have any clause in our, literally clause in our
Okay.
management.
So is there any legal reason why we couldn't combine these three dedicated funds into a single endowment for the Connecticut Headwaters Tract and let you use them as necessary for different kinds of projects?
Well, I think primarily the legal reason why we have them separated is because they were designated specifically, each with its own RSA designation. So we'd have to seek to revise the RSA to allow that combining.
course.
them. Yes.
Yeah. Senator Gray?
Are we sure that the money, when it was endowed to us, didn't have these three funds set up? Because if it did, then you got to go back through the AG and petition the courts to be able to
Yeah.
change it.
No, but it sounded like it was the state allocated the money to create these endowments, yes? It wasn't
No.
like endowed by Rockefeller or something.
State-
They had
the state
different
provided the
funders for
authority
each.
to allow us to proceed with getting endowments established, and then the sources of funding were brought forward to actually fund the endowments themselves. So in the case of each, the Trust for Public Lands is in each one of them, but in the case of one, the Nature Conservancy has contributed some funding. In the case of another, the Society of Protection of New Hampshire Forests.
Oh, I see.
I'm not sure if there would be any concern or consideration over the fact that the Society for New Hampshire Protection Forests gave their part towards road maintenance. So if the state were to now say, we're not discerning anymore between these functions, it's all to the good of any of them wherever it's needed, I don't know if there might be any consideration to allow the donors who gave the money at the time to, need to be able to say, well, we gave it for this, but we didn't give it for that.
Commissioner, can you comment?
I wasn't here when these conversations were originally had, but I think we need to do a little homework to figure out what strings perhaps were attached or promises made for each of the funds. So there's a legal path here, but there's also a political path. I think the good news is by the time there's a new legislative session, I believe we will have successfully worked out and negotiated and concluded our negotiations with Aurora to establish the 10-year management plan. I think that's a great time to have an overlapping conversation about how we're going to fund the stewardship of this property. And road maintenance is really key to the promise of public access. It's also key to get around to do the monitoring. So it does all tie together. I think we have some legwork to do to figure out the logistics to see if it's if there's a path forward, and talk through any unintended consequences. And there's also a narrative that we would have to share with some of these stakeholders who have been very interested in the future of this property.
All right, so that'll be a task for you, I guess.
Yes.
Other comments from the committee? No? Okay, good. All right, so you're going to get us more appropriate paperwork here, right? So,
Yes, I'm going to enhance this report to include a section that will reflect the actual endowment that we've discussed today, including the figures related to the endowment. Yes.
All right, thank you. So, all right, now I have a note here that Ms. Mezzapelli would like to talk to us about cleaning up off-book accounts.
Ah,
So
very
this
nice.
is separate. Any further questions for DNCR?
I may have some.
All right, hold on a second. So
Well,
Representative Walden.
I did. I wrote notes on things that I thought were either useful to understand what was going on or needed. Bureau of Natural Heritage has got a major funding problem, it looks like, or rather a problem which is growing. And I was wondering about whether you have the ability to increase the developer fees, which seems to be the only place the money could come from.
Which fund are you talking about?
Yeah,
This is on 612-240 AU 3407 Bureau of Natural Heritage, which is all by itself towards the end of the spreadsheet.
3407.
Oh, yeah.
Is it,
Increasing developer fees, yeah.
Oh, all right, number 240
Yeah.
on page 26 of my report.
So they do as far as I know, the main place that they get money from is that developers decide that they want to build something on land that is relatively undisturbed, and that they are required by our law to go and get the Bureau to tell them whether there's something that needs to be protected in there.
This is page 26. This is page 26 of 36 in your report.
Yes, and the funding source is clarified on page 27 under RSA 217A7A, section 1. Essentially, the funding, this is funded primarily by fees that are charged, as you've described, when developers or interested parties go onto certain land, they have to inquire as to whether or not there are any concerns or consideration that might disrupt the natural habitat areas. So they need to make inquiry. In doing so, there is a fee associated with that in order to provide that reporting and information. If it comes back that there is concern or consideration, we do collect the fee for that inquiry. And that goes through the environmental services. Does that clarify answer the question?
Well, it looks to me like your fees are in your rules, right? They're not in law.
They're defined in rules. The rules clarify what the cost of the fee is. So
Right.
for example,
so
I
if
believe
these
right
fees
now,
are inadequate because the fund looks like it constantly has a negative balance, then you might have to change your rules.
I believe the Bureau Administrator would agree wholeheartedly with you. In fact, as I understand it, they are seeking to make a rules change to increase the fees substantially at
That
this
is
time.
true. We're working closely with DES to make sure we're appropriately in what is fair market on this. And we've had productive conversations with Commissioner Bob Scott and Adam Crapo to a commitment to work through this together. So I'm hoping that sooner rather than later, we will have an opportunity to make that case.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions on this or other matter?
Well, the Historic Sites Fund is perpetually, but it is in better shape now because it has robbed money from the State Park Fund. But, so they are starting to get enough money to make some improvements to places that frequently are just, they try to keep the mold down.
Yeah, and we've benefited from some ARPA funding to make improvements at specific historic sites, which will be really helpful. It gave us, that boost. So those projects, are the contracts are being wrapped up right now, so that we hit the deadline, and that'll help, I think, with revenue and longevity. But yeah, historic sites, I think there's a lot of opportunity. As a history major, I think there's a lot more opportunity with these sites, but they do need a constant amount of work. Anyone who owns an old house would understand that clearly.
All right. Let's move on to the treasurer. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
To the department.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I won't take time. I just the note that you received is the Treasury is trying to do some cleanup of the RSA of the dedicated accounts. So you heard us talking about the off-book accounts. So we have a plan to first of all put those off-book accounts in the accounting system. With the upgrade of the new accounting system, there is a functionality, there's a module that will be able to move those, essentially put them in the accounting system, but we will have a special treatment. So that's a plan for next year. But part of that is we're trying to figure out what's already in the accounting system, what is not, and in the correct place where they should be recorded. So this is part of the cleanup. We have about 30 something accounts off book, and those, some of them are accounts really that at some point agencies asked us to open special accounts or investment accounts for those. Those are the type of accounts that we are putting back into the regular business of the state. We're not going to have special accounts for those. We only would like to keep essentially separate what our trust and escrow accounts and custodial accounts, things that shouldn't be part of, I guess, they need to be treated differently. So part of that cleanup, we're trying to identify those accounts already in RSA 612 that are called dedicated accounts. There's another section that are called trust and agency accounts, and there's another one that's called trust and escrow. And so we want to clean those up. There's some accounts that are not there, others that should be removed because no longer exist. Bottom line is we're working on that cleanup, and my hope is, as part of your agenda, we're able to provide you with a recommendation, a draft of what the law should look like, and perhaps that's something this committee could consider as part of the work that you do. So if there is time still in your schedule of this dedicated funds committee, I would love to come back and show you or work with you to see. Even, I mean, I have some ideas of how that should look like, but perhaps you have other. But again, part of your what you do, your objectives. Happy to work with you with this work. But I think it will be important to have a clear definition in the law of what should be kept separate. Or if we're going to have investment accounts for those, we can still have those. But there are others that simply need to go back. They're the funds that they're just agencies need to put it back into their business, and we shouldn't have anything special for them.
So would you be ready in about 2 weeks to
Yes.
suggest legislation?
I could
Yeah.
have some type of draft, and again, I can show it to you. Again, it's just what I think should look like. But again, I'm happy to work with you and your thoughts, your visions as to how those accounts really should be, where they belong. Like I said, some of them we have special accounts, and an accounting, or the state's financial statements are presented as fiduciary funds, but they're listed right now as just a typical dedicated accounts. So those are the ones that, again, it's a simple cleanup, but I'll be happy to share that with you.
Yeah, so come up with a list, right, in about 2 weeks, I think.
Yes.
And we'll work out a meeting date. Yeah, Representative Walmy.
Yeah, there is one that I've been dealing with since I started this process 20-something years ago on the government of Japan, because we facilitated on the process of coming to a treaty with, was it Korea at the time? Gave us the money to plant cherry trees around New Hampshire. That sat there for a very long time after they'd planted a bunch of them. And it was still there when I was looking at it, and it got turned somehow into an account to allow 3 members of state government to decide that one or another employee of the state was worthy of getting a small grant, which seemed very peculiar. And I don't know how they achieved that. They're hardly using the money, by the way. But I don't know how they achieved changing it over like that when it was a trust from the government of Japan. But there it is. I don't know what you do with something like that.
That's a great question, President Alame. So that's an account we have, and I'm a member of that board. So you are correct. There's not a lot of activity in that account. One of the work, again, this is just cleanup work, but one of the work for that board is really to define a purpose, review exactly. That is correct. That is my understanding. That's what the fund is for. But one of the things that that Department of Justice has suggested is we need to really clarify objectives of that fund. So there's an opportunity to really reestablish or review the mission of that fund, and define it, and so we can proceed with a correct policy. So
I was
there will be
thinking
more
it
work
could
on that for sure.
At least be given to the state nursery.
The other one that just briefly, the other one that I think in the past I've reported to you is the Ben Thompson Trust Fund. That fund requires some change. This requires a review, but also because of the way the law is written, a very old law, so that needs to be revised. So I've been having conversations with Department of Justice, Charitable Trust, and also with the university system of New Hampshire. And right now, what we would like to do is essentially we have a plan to move that fund to the university system endowment. So they will oversee the endowment, follow the will of Ben Thompson, and again, it will be managed probably more appropriately. So right now we're in the work. So there are two things that need to happen with that. One is Department of Justice, and there needs to be a court proceeding. The other one is to repeal the law. So I already started through the process of House Bill 2 to the agency budget process. We at least we are recommending to repeal the laws related to Ben Thompson. So you'll see that work when you deal with the budget. But if not, that would have been another appropriate work for this committee to review. But in case if things don't go well with House Bill 2, perhaps we'll can have a discussion again, because I think all parties that I've had conversations with are in favor of this plan, and it sounds like it will be a good path for providing this funds to the university system. They'll manage it just like they do any of their endowments that they hold. So.
Thank you. So, all right, so we'll schedule something offline for
Perfect.
when our next meeting is.
Thank
Okay.
you very much for your time.
All right. So next, I'd like to go approve the minutes of the last two meetings.
So move.
I have some I have a change, a correction or whatever. So let's start with the minutes of the 16th, September 16th. On the second page, under 612 Fund 178, it's listed. You wrote school building aid. It's actually school building authority. So
I thought it was aid in one place, but
yeah, it's well in the book and all that. It's school building authority. They approve applications for aid or whatever, but anyways, it should be authority.
well, given that, why I did bold things in both of these that we needed to look at.
No, I thought that was a good idea.
Yeah, and this one is obviously not able to use all the money that the general fund keeps giving it.
Right. Right, exactly. So that one I have kind of an action item to look up RSA 195-C:1 and see whether it should be changed, whatever. Yeah. So that's a separate issue. Okay. As far as the minutes go. And the other one is on the very end, you have bolded, no money has come in and it is time to repeal the RSA. I would put in that this is the RSA in question is 200-M:5.
Dash M.
Yeah, 200-M:5.
Yeah.
Okay. So those are the only changes I had. Anybody else?
Well,
Move to
I
approve
was-
as amended.
I, I did put a lot of these in bolding to see if people agreed or disagreed with different ideas that had come up. The first one is the second item on page 2.
Yes.
They would be on the 137 is the Board of Licensure of Interpreters for Deaf and Hard of Hearing. And they are just allowing the money in that fund to grow without doing anything with it.
Well, just,
And they did say at the time that they would be fine with moving that over to OPLC, which is good at streamlining.
no, I approve of the bolding, and we will be talking about actions in a moment.
Oh,
Okay.
So we're doing
But as
that
far as
separately.
approving the minutes
Okay,
as minutes, all
okay.
right.
So,
Any other changes?
Nope.
All right. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? No. Okay, unanimous. Now the other one, September 18th. I only noticed one little thing here. Let's see. This is a long one. So, under the
Yes.
state library, which is like the
near
third
the
from the
end,
end,
Yeah.
yeah, something like that.
Third from the end.
Right. I had a note that on Fund 612-179, that I had a note that the title or it references something called the Family Resource Connection.
Yes, they said that they had stopped doing that.
That's right. And so I have a note that we mentioned that we should check RSA 201-A:10 and possibly delete this reference to Family Resource Connection as a defunct term.
201
-A:10.
A:10. Yeah,
Okay.
I didn't realize that was in
Right.
the.
Any other changes? All right. Senator Gray, want to make a motion?
Approve as amended.
Okay.
Second.
All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Unanimous. All right. Good. Now, as far as timing, do we want to kind of go through the spreadsheet and see what kind of actions should be in any bill that comes from this committee or any other bill that members might want to do? Do we have time right now? Or do people want to come back and do that some other time? All right, why don't we do that now? All right. So,
I would like to point out that I did not always put on this one I did put on the spreadsheet.
okay. All right.
The,
So starting with banking, I don't think there's any change. Right? Then veterans home, same thing.
Yeah.
Those all seem good. And then Department of Education. So we have the one we just talked about, move to OPLC.
mhm.
So I have that as a note. Is that
Yeah.
something we can all do as a committee? Send this licensure and certification fund to OPLC?
Probably end up in HB2.
Uh-huh.
Well, or like I said, it could be in our bill.
Yeah, file a bill.
Okay. All right, so that's that one. That's fund number 137.
Yeah.
Now, I noticed you have yellow on 167, but I didn't have any notes to make any changes.
Well, the yellow,
So that's, you don't,
I think what,
see here.
Yeah, I removed all of those in the end. 167, two small dormant private trust funds.
Well, this is the
For
Hattie and
Kane.
Harriet.
Yeah, the Hattie and the Harriet.
Okay.
And they say they can't send them over to UNSNH, even though they're sending another one over.
Hmm.
Um,
So maybe this is in the same category as the cherry tree
But
fund,
what they're
right?
talking about is writing rules to set up a joint grant program themselves, which seems kind of ridiculously expensive, or just pooling the money and sending it to the two state university and state college from the trusts every year for scholarships,
Okay.
which would fit in pretty well with the intent of the donors.
Okay.
I guess not pooling it, they'd have to do them separately because one of them is just Keene and the other one is Keene and Plymouth.
All right. So I'll make a note to check whether they need any RSA help in order to do that. Right. So send interest to Keene and Plymouth for scholarships. Okay. All right. Next.
There was one above that, the private trust account for all kinds of assistance to the legally blind,
Yes.
which has been growing. It's was up to $686,000 in 2020. Had grown 50% since 2020. And the trouble is that there are all sorts of groups working in this area. And so they don't probably give it much attention.
Right, but you have this note, the department will look for ways to set up grant
Yeah,
programs.
they said
cetera.
that they'd try to do that. I don't know
Alright.
whether they're going to or not, but
That seemed good enough to me, but
okay,
anybody else?
just leave it like that.
Okay.
You've even got the Secretary of State voting machines and stuff for blind people. So I mean, there's plenty of places to spend it. Got to be done.
And Future Insight is always trying to get money out of me. That's the main nonprofit that does things like send my father this incredible machine that allowed him to read for a while longer. And my father was also in Hanover, so.
All right.
But
Okay.
so
So,
then
yeah, go ahead.
then there was this teacher competency thing, which they are very occasionally using to send someone to a conference.
Where are we?
It's on between 138 and the two dormant funds. It's just below it, snuck together. And they say they'll try to figure out more uses for it, which is all kind of vague. And
Oh, Fund 139.
Yeah.
Okay, fine.
education is not very organized.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, if you look at their statutes, as has been done by the people at the head of legislative services and the budget office, they can't be organized.
I see.
The statutes contain things going back 150 years
I see.
that make no sense today.
So they need a recodification in a new chapter or something?
Yes,
Okay. Well, that's beyond my,
right. It's beyond here, but it's
Yeah.
still anything that can be done that sends some of this stuff to places where it can be used more easily is,
Okay. All right. Oh, I see. Okay. Right. So this one, I see what you're saying. This one has low expenses, but a slowly growing balance.
yeah, right.
Right.
And it's another private trust fund that we can't change. We can only redirect. Yes? Uh-huh.
And it says the state treasurer shall invest as a permanent fund the proceeds of the sale of state land affected under the authority of the joint resolution approved June 28, 1867.
What?
Annual income for that purpose. So
Wow.
it is one of those ancient
But if it was just the RSA that redirected it, then it could be changed, right?
Was that other than our own law, was that a legal requirement that it go here?
I guess the next step would be to look at that, the sale of the state land, to see if there's anything there, but it seems like they're taking that, the proceeds of that land sale and directing it into this special fund as of 1969, which is already 102 years after the land sale. So I don't know, I don't know what else they're.
How did they?
find.
Oh my,
Right. So it sounds like somebody just made a decision that
yeah.
they wanted to support teachers, and here was a convenient source of money, right? So, yeah. Okay.
One thing I can think of is sending out a notice to teacher training schools that this money is available to help the students certify themselves, for instance.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But
All right, let's go on to the next page here. So, then the next one was the school building authority we talked about, which we previously said we should get rid of and lapse this to the general fund because it's basically getting money and never has no expenses for 5
Right.
years.
right,
Okay, so that one will,
Yeah.
Yeah.
now
so
the
eliminate.
one after that, they are now getting people to use teachers that spent their lives in AT&T telephone program and are very good at computing, as in our major,
Mhm.
and retraining them on briefly through to how to teach to young students and getting them into the school system, which seems like a useful thing to do at this point. So they're
Okay.
thinking that program that they only developed recently is going to increase the number of teachers, and therefore they will be able to use it on the number of teachers coming in.
Okay.
I guess there will be enough people. The problem was the end of year balance had shrunk by half because there
Right.
weren't as many teachers. But so
Okay.
I guess that could stay, and we might not see it in 5 years as a problem. Unlike some of the others, these will
Right,
just
but
be
it has
back to haunt us.
Sure, but it has, I mean, it's considerable ongoing revenue and balance. Yeah. Okay, that one seemed okay. All right, next. the blind vending machine thing, it seemed like such a small, this Fund 296, right? Seemed like such a small amount, not to mess with, I don't know.
Yeah, it can just go on as it
Yeah,
is.
let it go
but-
on, kind of thing.
But, the two before it. Two, 228, licensing of private post-secondary career schools.
Right.
They say their fees are set to 125% of cost,
Mm-hmm.
which is a ruling that didn't happen with a lot of places, but that education seems to be going with, except that their expenses exceed the revenues most of the time.
Mm.
And so the end of year balance has gone down by about a third in the 5 years. Now, how can their expenses exceed the revenues if they're doing 125% of cost with fees?
Hmm. You want to ask them? I can ask them.
Unless
Yeah.
costs are exceeding 25% increase.
All right, so we're talking about Fund 225, right?
So maybe the fees were
18.
set to 125% of cost in 2010, and
Yeah, a lot going on,
50.
and they don't bother to change them.
yeah, that may be it.
I think we've run into that before. They set them at 125% and then they don't change it
Ah,
for inflation or anything.
Right, but so once again, I mean, this one seemed like it had enough money in it to last another cycle,
yeah,
right? And
it does to last another cycle, probably.
um,
Could
yeah.
we just make a blanket statement that they ought to update all of their fees?
They should review their fees
Review
and
their
make
fees.
appropriate adjustments.
Yes,
All right.
exactly.
All right, so fine. So in our report, kind
Yeah.
of, yeah, okay. All right, so this is accounting, right? So report, DOE review fees. To meet expenses. Okay.
Right.
All right, good.
That would take care of a couple of them, I think.
Yeah.
Uh,
All right.
And the deceased veterans' children,
Yeah, right. But there aren't many.
there aren't very many. And
Where'd that go?
and they could provide a larger grant, or you could cut the money the general fund gives them.
Right. Right. So that, again, that's not really our thing, but yeah. So maybe Division 2.
Yeah.
General fund not needed for a while. Okay. All right, we got the vending
And then there
machine.
was the robotics team.
Yeah, that one seemed to be going well.
Seems to be doing well, but it's not creating as many teams as it is collecting money. And it collects the money directly from you, I think.
Right, so this
From
is
the GF.
right, I think so too. Where is that? Yeah, right, so the general fund puts in 750,000,
Mm-hmm.
but it hasn't needed quite that much. Is that it?
Maybe because they're running out of schools
That do it? Yeah.
that can do it. I should imagine it'd be really hard in the smallest schools.
All right. So again, we will, where is this?
324.
324. Okay. 324. Okay. So again, Division 2, reduce. Uh, 750,000. Okay. We're expecting this to be a tough budget year, so
Yeah,
places where we can
Right.
reduce a little are welcome. Okay.
very tough budget year.
Okay. Next.
Yeah, this next one's been losing money considerably. But they may have finished what they're doing pretty much. They, I think, just got into internet connectivity a few
I
years
see.
ago. But they had all this ARPA money for it.
I see. Right. So they spent a lot for ADA compliance, I think, also.
They spent a lot for armoring the
Oh, okay.
schools
Yeah,
at the beginning. That's what the whole
Protection.
thing was about at the
I
beginning.
see. Everything. Right, but in terms of, it looks like they tend to decide, let's do this kind of project, like
Mm-hmm.
internet or whatever, and
Yeah.
then go find money for it and use this fund as just sort of the checking account, right? So I think it's okay.
Maybe. Yeah. Yeah, it could stay.
Okay.
And then the next one has been deleted, but not from the 612 list.
Right. So that's an obvious one that we will put in our bill. Okay.
And the last one you already mentioned.
Right. We already mentioned we're going to delete that one. And I'm going to look into this one that's at the X, right? Even though it was 2023. I'll talk to
Which
science. This one? X.
Oh, the X. Oh, yes.
Fund X.
That. Oh, yeah,
I'm going to go read 12051A
yeah,
and see, and I'll talk to the Science and Tech
yeah.
Committee and see if anything active is going on here. It had to do with wind, offshore wind.
Well, part of it
Training.
had to do with offshore wind. Yeah, it's supposed to have a committee. The committee has not yet been formed. And the committee on the marine training part of it isn't even in the write-up of the bill. It's just something they thought that maybe they'd be able to do.
Well, I have a note to go read this and I'll see
Okay.
what's going on. Right? Okay,
So that takes you to the 16th.
right. Okay. So information tech, no change, right?
Right.
Um,
And revenue administration.
CRA,
We've done.
right. The only question was whether to move this technically to the treasurer. Maybe not, maybe it's not worth doing.
It is, oh,
The RIMS account?
well, the RIMS account is a very complex computer program
Mhm.
that if you took it away and put it in the treasury, the DRA couldn't function.
Well, no, this one is just to pay off the bond.
Yeah, yeah, and the treasury already, the
They
account is in the treasury.
right,
The DRA just figures out how much it is and ships the money over to the account.
right. So maybe leave it alone.
But the
Yeah.
treasurer isn't going to be able to figure out whether this was the right amount or not. They do come to the Ways and Means committees and they say, look, this is how much we've gotten and this is how we calculated how much we
Right, what we're saving.
can send over.
Yeah. Okay. All right, we'll leave it alone. All right, next one, OPLC. We need to repeal this 61232.
Right.
Okay. So that one's all set.
But we need to repeal the 612 number.
Yeah.
But they've left pieces in it about real estate appraiser that have to be somewhere in the state law.
Okay.
And so we don't want to repeal anything that's actually in
Right.
the RSA 310B that's still there.
Right. Keep.
They took out about half of it.
Okay.
So it's just the 612 number that has to
I
disappear.
understand. Okay. So we don't want to touch 340 or 363.
Yeah. Right.
All right, so this off-book thing, we might hear from the treasurer on 71.
Yeah.
So the next one I got a note on is 319. So,
Way down there.
yeah. So this one is the site evaluation committee has this one employee who's like the Maytag repairman. He has nothing
Yeah.
to do, right?
No, I think that he works in other things. This is a part-time part of his job.
Exactly. So he works for the PUC, basically.
Right.
Right? And there's this dedicated fund that in case somebody says, I want to build a power plant,
Yeah.
then he would swing into action, kind of.
And they would have to hire a bunch of other people.
And they would have to
help.
hire a lot of consultants and do a kind
Yeah.
of bunch of stuff. So, but I'm wondering whether this guy can just be permanently part of the and his accounting be part of the PUC and not have this dedicated fund. So that's, I have a note to look into that.
Well, he did say that they got rid of the previous person by taking her into another job in another place. And for a year, there was nobody there. And he said, that's why he said that he kept busy last year with 2 years of accumulated dockets and complaints.
Mm.
And so that function will still be there at various times.
Okay.
I don't know how much of his salary they put there, but it's the PUC stuff for me is kind of hard to
Yeah.
follow.
Well, I will look into that one. Okay.
And then this other one was I put under 253, which
Okay.
is all of the Reggie money coming in. And the audit expenses that we've got says that it's $14,275,000 for the 5 years. But then in the same page below, they list the expenses, which total $20,241,000. And then they tell us, the only place where they tell us the breakdown is for that 20 million. 18% was compensating the Department of Energy. 18% was compensating Department of Energy and the Department of Environmental Services for their expenses. 45% was for wood pellet boilets in residential, commercial, and industrial solar installation projects, and 37% for competitive grants for commercial, industrial, renewable energy, and low moderate income program grouped together. And then 2,333,000 unaccounted for. And this gives you no real information on the things that they say that they're supposed to be doing, how much money went into each parts of the program.
I see.
Which include the Office of Offshore Wind and Energy Innovation, which doesn't sound like it's active yet, but which also include solar projects, a capped renewable and thermal energy projects, low moderate residential separated off, non-residential renewable energy projects. And it really seems pretty much like a black box to me.
So do you want to get them back to ask them more questions, or?
That would be nice to see if we could get any more information out of them about how much of this is going to each of the targets which are in the state's RGGI application that I think is the ones I was just listing off,
Okay.
and to different parts of it, because the parts are supposed to be responsibly balanced.
Okay. All right. Well, why don't you come up with a list of questions? We'll send it to them and ask them to come in 2 weeks.
Okay.
Okay.
And the other parts just pretty much, I think, live off of that money.
All right.
So
So are we talking about Fund 253 or 272?
I'm talking about 253 because that's where they got into more specifics,
Okay.
but the specifics don't add up.
All right. Follow me. List of questions. All right. Task questions. All right. So Jennifer, you'll invite them back once you get the questions sent to them. Yeah. Okay. Good. All right. So anything else? PUC, energy.
Energy efficiency. Yeah, I didn't
Okay.
see any particular problem with that. That all fuels thing was kind of weird, but it gets sent to New Hampshire Saves.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, good. So next, DNCR.
Yeah.
All right, so we've talked with them about separating the Cannon ski from the
Yeah.
parks. I think it makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we'll add that to our bill. So make a new dedicated fund. Okay.
And they're working on the issues that I had with the Connecticut lakes, headwaters,
Right.
endowments.
Right. So they'll work on, they'll give us an opinion on whether we can combine those three funds into a single one,
Mhm.
right? So therefore, they have more flexibility on their, yeah.
Now, you're
Spending.
working off of this, and I'm working off of the separation between programs, which made it, I
Okay.
thought would make it easier, but
All right, go ahead. So,
here. That one is
Forest
Parks and Rec has 10 funds is at the beginning of the 5th page.
Right.
And we already discussed that pretty well.
Yeah.
Oh, and we should have asked the treasurer this question. We've got the Hampton meters as a 612. And
Mhm.
we have the Hampton meters inside of an accounting unit in 61233B, as I'm calling it.
I see.
So are we double counting them?
I see. So, where is the Hampton
Hampton meters.
managing a park? Oh, so this is
Just
Fund
below it,
105,
actually.
right? Fund 105, accounting unit 7300,
Yeah.
right? So your note says,
Mm-hmm.
the first 200,000 goes into this fund, and then the rest goes to Fund 33. So that's why it's in Fund 33. Fund 33 is the main one,
Yeah.
right?
Fund 33 is the main
Right.
one.
So by law, 200,000 is specifically to fund improvement.
So yeah, so we end up with only 200,000 a year showing up in Fund 105.
Yes.
But back on 33, it says should be separated. So
Yeah, we want to separate the
you want to, if you're
park
going to
fund from
have the
the
funds
ski
go
area.
back to 33, then you need to say what part of 33.
Right.
Yeah.
It's the state parks.
Yeah.
It's not the ski area.
Yeah,
Right.
that's why I talked about the park fund.
Right. Right.
That's just to show you I was awake then.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. So, so I think that one's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think they've done a great job of cleaning up. 5 years ago, this was impossible.
Right. And I have a note on Fund 107, the mining permits to read the RSA and see if it needs some updating. You said, should this fund continue to exist? I have, should it move to the state geologist? Right.
I
So
don't know
I'm
what
gonna go.
else the state geologist does, whether he's overworked already
Yeah.
and would not appreciate somebody coming in and asking him if he can get a mining permit for 2 acres of land in North Conway.
Yeah. Right. So I want to go. I'll have an action item to look into that a little more. All right. All right, and then on Fund 179, the state librarian, we had, is it defunct? Does the RSA need some updating? Or are
let
we
me
not
get
there
to
yet?
The state librarian,
Oh, I see. We're going in a different order.
I'm using a different thing.
Okay, well, in
state-
any case, so we solved so the parking meters are okay, right?
Yeah,
Okay. State library, right?
yeah.
Isn't that the next one?
It gets 1.5 million a year from the general fund.
I think so. Yeah. Let's see. So we're talking about Fund 101. Yeah.
It seemed pretty clear, other than that. But
Actually, right. So that's not related to this. Well, I mean, this dedicated fund doesn't get 1.5 million.
yeah, right, separate from this account.
Yeah, that's just part of their budget.
Yeah,
Right. Yeah.
it's what keeps their budget alive.
Exactly.
So the next one, 102, damaged or lost book account receives fines. I wasn't quite sure from the write-up and what they were telling us, the state librarian was telling us, whether they are getting fines or donations. That is it voluntary to
Yeah.
pay them for the damage?
No, I think it is fines, right? Somebody loses the book or whatever. Lost and damaged books.
Or brings them back late.
Yeah. Yeah, they
Right.
didn't even mention late fines.
No, this
Most
is,
of the libraries are doing away with them.
With the late fines, or
Yeah.
just happy to get it back someday?
right. So I mean, they still have a good balance, but it is declining.
Yeah.
Because, so they may have to charge more.
Yeah,
But he seemed reluctant to do that,
yeah.
so.
But yeah, so that's,
But I don't think it's in law what he charges for books, right? So,
it couldn't be in law for, well, it could be in law for the cost of a total repair, and that would probably be beyond a number of lenders.
well, if you want me to, I will go read the law. Which would be, okay, 201A:19, okay. Read. All right, and what was next?
Well, you'd put something on 179,
Yes, I have a note
that-
to do
yeah,
something.
check 201A10 and
Right.
delete something, I'm not sure what.
Family Resource Connection.
Oh, right, right.
Okay.
Yeah,
Good.
that's it, because they aren't doing it anymore. Oh, but we skipped, did we skip anything? The Mount Washington Summit, the Trails Bureau, and donations to state parks, we skipped over.
Right, but I didn't have any notes that we wanted to do anything.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't either.
So I think those are okay.
The only thing is somewhere, but I think it may already have been done to take, I think it was just in their report talking about the Dartmouth College bonding that they were paying off,
Mm,
which they paid off in 20.
right, that was a long time.
It's irrelevant at this point.
All right, so then we come to.
Historic preservation, the coastal resilience. I have talked with the sponsor, who is David Waters, about this.
Which one are you on?
I'm
Oh,
on
close to 358.
358, yeah.
Okay.
It's been sitting there. It was put into law just before COVID hit,
Mm-hmm.
and that made it complicated getting started. But the thing that made it more complicated getting started was a former senator in his district who insisted that they invite everybody and their brother to the commission, which made it impossible to get a quorum.
Oh, it's one of those things that you have a
Yeah,
25-member commission and
yeah, or more.
6 people show up
I
or
think
something.
it was more than 30.
Okay, yeah.
And he is now saying that he would like to put some stuff together. Maybe, I don't know if he could do it in the next 2 weeks.
Who are we talking about?
This is David Waters.
Okay.
Because a number of the towns have on their own, because of this being an important issue for them,
I see.
have come up with different projects, and he thinks that some kind of coordinating of that would be useful.
Mm.
So he may bring it in next year as a separate bill, or he might have something together in time to come and talk to us about it,
Okay.
going within
Should I call him?
within this framework. Sure, you call him too.
Okay. Okay.
But they are getting serious erosion on the coast,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of historic buildings and things sit on the coastal shores, and
Okay.
which is not a good place for them.
All right. But our default is probably to get rid of this fund,
Yeah,
regardless.
right.
Okay.
The default would be just get rid of the fund.
Okay.
And
Let the
but-
towns come in and maybe get some FEMA grants.
yeah, well, part of it has been they've gotten a little bit of FIFA grants. I think they got a little of ARPA money and things like that.
Yeah.
But I think that fund is not going to work. So,
Okay.
but I think he'd like to figure out pieces of the statute that could be kept in order to help the towns organize themselves on this more than they're doing right now. And he admits he dropped the ball after COVID started to fade.
Gotcha. All right.
So I told him I'd bring it up.
All right. And so then on Fund 240, they already talked about raising their fees, right? I think.
Yeah, we've talked about that, and
Commissioner, right, because
think
this
they're
is
going
the
to.
one where we said their fees are in their rules and they're
right.
working on changing it. So I think this one is okay. This one is okay. All right.
As long as they don't raise them too much.
Yeah.
Developers are building our housing.
All right, so I think we're done.
Yeah,
All right.
I think so too. Imagine.
All right, let's talk about the next meeting to do cleanup and maybe have a draft report to look at. How is, let's see here. The afternoon of Wednesday, October 16th?
That's a Wednesday, right?
Wednesday.
Yeah.
Looks okay
Oh.
so far.
I've got a 12 to 2 p.m. down here.
Oh. And then you want to have lunch, so then,
Well, I think it probably has lunch in it.
oh, okay. So you could start at 2 p.m.?
Yeah.
Is that okay, Senator Gray?
So far.
Okay. All right, why don't we schedule 2 p.m. Wednesday, October 16th?
17th, isn't it?
I have
Which day-
16.
Which day you said, Wednesday the 16th?
Oh, it is the 16th, yeah.
Is that right? Is that different
Yeah.
for you? Or is it?
2 o'clock, Wednesday 16th.
Okay. Right. All right. Any other business? All right. We're adjourned. Thank you.
Okay.
Good.
For once, I'm going to remember to write down when we adjourn.
But which clock are you going to use?
My own, 35
Okay.
or 36. But it's better than